So I can do a quick introduction if you like, guys, before they get started. So my name's Kalani. I think I spoke to most of you earlier in the previous session, but I'm a university recruiter for VMware, and I've got here some of our grads who just started with us in February earlier this year. So I'm very, very grateful that they've been able to put a presentation together with only being at VMware for 7 months. So thank you, big thank you to them. We also have a graduate, Vincent, who was a graduate last year. So a bit more of our alumni group here as well. So thank you, Vince, as well. All our grads, we've got Shika and Vince are consultants at VMware, and we've got Mark, who's in the R&D team. I'll let them introduce themselves, but I just thought I'll do a bit of a segue into who you guys are.
Thanks, Kalani.
Thank you. So yeah, hi everyone, and welcome to the Syncs 2021 Hackathon opening ceremony. As Kalani mentioned, I'm Shika, and today my team and I are going to be running this workshop for you on behalf of our company VMware. So before we do get into that, we'll properly introduce ourselves as well. So Mark, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, Kalani's already given a little rundown, but I'll introduce myself. Hi guys, I'm Mark. I'm an R&D graduate. I'm an engineer in the innovation team, and I work in the enterprise desktop products. So I kind of engineer, innovative products inside products that you would use as an end user on your computers or on your phones. So I really like working with people on their experiences and engineering for a better world.
And I'm Shika Nes, as Kalani mentioned before. I'm a graduate associate consultant, and I've joined this year in the 2021 batch, so it's been about 6 months. And I'm a part of the professional services team at VMware, and my job basically just includes designing and deploying VMware solutions for customers around their needs. So I'll pass it on to Vince.
G'day team, my name is Vince. I am a associate consultant working in the same division as Shika. I'm from the 2020 intake. Yep, mainly here for moral support. Shika and Mark will be driving the show today.
Yeah, so I'm glad that we got to see Atlassian tackle the ideation side of things, because it nicely leads into what we're planning to discuss today with everyone, and that would be on how to take the idea that you do have from development to production. We're going to outline a kind of case study on how to get your application infrastructure right the first time. So we're going to demonstrate how customers can leverage VMware technology to deploy apps across different clouds in a scalable and in a cost-effective manner, and basically how you can utilize this to create a process of your own as well. But before we do get into the nitty-gritty, a lot of people wonder, who on earth is VMware? So I'll pass it on to Mark to explain that a little bit.
Thanks, Shika. So who are we as VMware? We are maybe the biggest software company that you haven't heard of. You probably use our software every day, hiding under the hood of other companies, but without realizing it. In fact, 99% and more of that of Fortune 1000 companies in every industry actually use our software. So we're everywhere, but you don't see us. And that's because we're in what's called a data center. So when companies develop applications, they have to deploy that onto infrastructure, and they usually host that infrastructure in a data center. And VMware has its roots in that data center, providing software virtualization. And that's basically where we achieved our growth. But now we're kind of transitioning into a new, more modern company with more modern goals, and Shika will go into that a little bit later. So I'm going to give a little rundown on virtualization, because that is our roots, and that's actually going to be a really important understanding virtualization will help you understand how infrastructure works for your applications. So virtualization started with the x86 architecture, which was a very traditional way of looking at things, which I've got on the left-hand side here. And it's where an application would be bundled with a single operating system and placed on a single server. So for example, let's say Facebook needs a database application. They might put that the database will be the application. They might put it on a Linux operating system in a server somewhere in a Facebook-owned data center. But that's all very nice and it's all very simple. But the problem is servers are really expensive to keep running. So you want to maximize your resource utilization and get the most bang for your buck, basically. And if that application isn't using 100% of that server resources, you're actually wasting a lot of money. So VMware created virtualized virtual machines. So that's where you bundle up an application and an operating system, and you put it inside this blue box here. That's a little virtual machine there. And that acts exactly like a normal machine, except it doesn't run on a physical server. It actually runs on top of a hypervisor. And this hypervisor, it can be VMware or it can be another company, but it basically takes the physical hardware of your server. So like, a hard disk or your CPU, and it divides it into little chunks to give each of your little virtual machines. So they think they're getting real hardware, but they're not. They're actually getting virtual hardware. So that's the basics of virtualization. And it actually introduces a host of benefits, from partitioning to isolation and encapsulation as well, where a virtual machine, instead of being a physical disk, a physical like machine, it's now a set of files. So you can like save it, you can copy it, you can pass it around. It's quite portable. It simplifies a lot of things. But the main thing is it's like a big cost saving, right? Because now companies can get the most out of their servers, so they can reduce the number of servers, and having the same number of applications. So you may or may not have experienced virtual machines yourself before, but if you haven't, I'm going to show you a little demonstration of how they work, and I think it might be quite fun. So to start with a virtual machine, you'll remember you need an operating system. And an operating system needs a disk image. So you can get a disk image or an ISO file from like Windows, or you can get Linux or Mac. And I've just downloaded one already, but you can just get one from the internet. It's not that hard. And with this ISO, I'm going to create a virtual machine. But remember, to make a virtual machine, you need to run a virtual machine off a hypervisor. So I've got a hypervisor. This is VMware Fusion, but there are a bunch of other hypervisors. Oracle make a hypervisor called VirtualBox. It does the same thing. Basically lets you run virtual machines. So let's start up and create a new virtual machine. And you drag an ISO here to start installing. So I'm just going to bring this ISO over. I'm going to choose my Windows version. Continue without key is fine. You've got a bunch of configuration settings. And this is interesting because it actually shows you the hardware that you're giving to this virtual machine. So the hypervisor controls this hardware. Obviously, my computer has more hardware than this, but I'm sending down 2 CPU cores, 2 gigabytes of memory, and 60 gigabytes of hard disk. So that's all the virtual machine will see. I save this virtual machine, and you'll see here, it's actually going to boot just like a normal Windows box, but it's going to take some time to install. So I've actually got one here ready, waiting for you. You can see this one installing in the meantime. But yeah, this basically shows how you can run Windows, and it looks like any other Windows system inside my Mac, and that's with a hypervisor. Cool. Now back to the demo. And back to the presentation, should I say? Shika.
So as cool as that may seem, that's actually only what we started with, but who is VMware today? Well, VMware's overall vision can be consolidated into 5 solutions. And before I explain them to you, I always say this, I like to look at them as a cake with 4 vital layers and 1 final layer of icing on top. And you might think I'm crazy, but let me explain it to you. And we'll make this quick. So if we could, thank you. So the 5 layers, we have the first layer, app modernization, which is you have any idea that you can run on any cloud using any device on any application. The second layer that we have is the multi-cloud solution. So this is your private, your public, your telco clouds. We have the third layer, which is the virtual cloud network, where VMware leverages network and security in a simplified manner to provide users with a unified model for their network issues. The fourth layer, and probably the most important, during this pandemic, we have the digital workspace, where VMware aims to improve the overall employee experience through a manner of modern management and hybrid virtual desktop infrastructure. And finally, just like the icing on the cake that spreads across all 4 layers, we have intrinsic security, that is embedded security, which eliminates the need for external security vendors. And this is your VMware vision, which is your cake. So if we could go to the next slide, thank you. So this is just the overall VMware vision we have, any cloud, any app on any device, and with embedded intrinsic security. And to the next slide, please. And just a little bit more about the multi-cloud solution. So we currently have 3 options available to customers. We've got a private cloud, which basically is your on-prem infrastructure. For example, VMware is one of the largest private cloud providers. We have our public cloud. These cloud services are exposed to the public and can be used by anyone. For example, Amazon Web Services, AWS, which most of you probably have heard of, and the hybrid cloud. So these are cloud services that are distributed amongst both public and private. So you can have your sensitive applications kept inside the organization's network on your private cloud, whereas other services can be hosted on the organization's network using a public cloud, and they can be used interchangeably on a daily basis. So now that we know what VMware does, let's have a look at how VMware can help consumers with their application's development to production process through gathering necessary requirements you may need to start with.
Sorry about that audio. Yep, thanks for that lead in, Shika. So some of you might remember last year's presentation. Notstash is still raring to go from 2020, now up and running in 2021. In our plan for global domination, as you may have known, we service the underserved Squirrel market, and it's kind of a mix of ZipPay and DoorDash for squirrels. So first thing is we've identified 5 applications that are key to our product launch, and more importantly, we've identified a application workflow. Mainly speaking, our comparison engine is where most of our e-commerce and data analytics begins the transaction. That usually leads into our order system for actual tracking and fulfillment. And finally, we get to the credit check and payment engine, which are actually third-party SaaS products that we've implemented to actually fulfill the transaction and get those Squirrel currency down to our coffers. And finally, the most important part, fulfillment, API brokers engines to our delivery drivers. But yeah, we're having a bit of scaling problem with actually getting this implemented across APAC. So how do we move forward from here, Mark?
So first of all, thanks, Vincent, for joining us today. I know you're an incredibly successful founder of Notstash, and let's look at how we can bring your infrastructure and support your needs and bring your product to a production-ready system. So first of all, let's talk about your goals. What do you aim to achieve with Notstash in the near future?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So mainly speaking, I've identified our application stack, and I've identified that we're looking to launch in APAC. Right now, we're having a lot of issues with scaling and version control when it comes to running localized campaigns. So we're really looking towards tackling a point of presence in multiple geos. But the key thing is our market team is trying to get a bit more aggressive when it comes to our analytics. So we're not really sure how to balance and really make sure our dependencies are covered.
All right. So yeah, it sounds like you've got a bunch of interesting issues here. I know scaling is a tough one. And to get scaling right, you really need to know how and have a good idea of how you're hosting your infrastructure, where you're hosting your infrastructure, and where you want to go in the future. So you've got these three options here: on-premise, a bit of a hybrid mix, or just going in the public cloud. Where do you think you want to go? Where do you lie with Nutstash?
At this stage, I think we're definitely committed to using the Google Analytics tool. I think our marketing team is much more familiar with that when it comes to doing the transactions. That being said, though, from our e-commerce inputs, we've got an existing footprint in Azure because that's just what our team ended up going with initially. We do have some data privacy requirements for on-premise. So I guess it is going to have to be a we're not really sure how to migrate our workloads if that's required.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a tough issue. And I can understand you've got a bunch of different cloud vendors and you don't want to necessarily be locked into one of them. And you also want your stuff that is in a public cloud to work well with your stuff that's on premise. So we're going to move into, now I'm going to describe infrastructure as a service. So it's a broad idea of how we can solve problems like yours. And I'm going to Shika and I will use VMware Tech as an example, but this isn't to say it's the only way to solve this. We just want to talk through how infrastructure can be created as code to support your needs in an automated and simple fashion. So here is a little screenshot from VMware's product called Vrealize Automation. And Shika will get into that a little bit in more detail, but I'm just going to go straight into how is an easy way for you to apply the resources to generate your infrastructure. So on the left, you can see the resources pane. This shows the resources that you have that you're going to need to run your program. So things like machine, which is your compute power, network, your connectivity, and volume, which is like your storage. You can drag that into the design canvas and kind of connect it all together really visually where it makes sense to you. And that gets translated into the code you see on the right-hand side, the configuration pane. And that code becomes your template. That code is your what's called infrastructure as a code model. And with that template, you can use that to automate your processes. So the software will automatically create the desired state that you have in your template. And you can also bring that template between the different cloud sites that you have. So how does that sound to you? Does that sound like it would help some of your problems?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing is, it's mostly important to actually identify dependencies. Clearly, our main priorities are around machine and I guess network. But, I guess having access to universal volumes and storage and that kind of thing. Yeah, it makes it really clear that the main thing we got to get in touch is, actually correctly identifying our dependencies. Our dev guys are going to love this infrastructure as code implementation, especially when it comes to, resource claims and all that. But I'm not entirely sold in terms of, am I still making queries to individual vendors, or is this a single platform?
Right, Shika, take it away.
So Vince, as we discussed, Vrealize Automation, or VRA as we like to call it, helps abstract your application from infrastructure. So it allows you to first model your services, whether they are test or development environments. And once that is achieved, we can now deploy that service anywhere to a private or public cloud. And you can create fine-grained policies that will allow you to personalize your services at the time of delivery based on the role of the requester as well. So as you can see from the image on the screen, we have applications being accessed from cloud services to different dev teams based on their roles. And now that we've outlined the infrastructure resources, moving between, I guess, Google Cloud Analytics, AWS, and backend services at Azure can literally be done from a single pane of glass. And clearly cataloging your workloads in advance is going to make launches and scaling out a lot easier across cloud providers for you and your application. So how does that sound to you, Vince?
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I mean, at the end of the day, it really comes down to the consumers of the infrastructure. It's nice to have the abstraction of the nitty gritty into predefined templates. To a certain extent, it is key to test your launch before it goes live, and really drill down on dependencies. I think this is going to be a more ongoing process in terms of speaking with actual application stakeholders and really rehearsing actual full deployments, catalog by catalog.
Well, that's definitely something we can do with you. And I hope that through this experience of gathering requirements from you, we were at least able to help you understand how VMware can provide Nutstash's application, a smooth process from development to production, using our VMware technology to help you deploy your applications possibly across different clouds. And we can go to the next slide. So does anyone have any questions on our presentation? We hope you enjoyed our little customer mock that we did for you. And we only hope that it will be helpful and useful for you to use a similar process when kind of gathering requirements from customers, and also while thinking about the infrastructure of your applications.
So obviously that was a pretty high level view. The actual conversation goes a little bit more into the nitty gritty, but it's kind of just a general kind of scoping that multiple stakeholders need to actually compare notes, which is something that can get lost in translation sometimes.
Thank you, VMware team. That was a really interesting presentation, especially the role play. I like that, with lots of takeaways. If anyone has any questions, feel free to chuck it in the chat or unmute yourself. I do have a few questions. So first off, as a uni student, we don't really get exposed to a lot of these technologies. What would you say is a good way to explore virtual machines or that type of technology outside of course, uni courses and stuff like that?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Michael. As I showed you in your demo, in that little demo, actually with virtual machines, anyone can do it. All that stuff was free. So you can have a play around with that as much as you like. And in fact, virtual machines are a good place to do dev on, because if you break something, you explode it, nothing really happens. Doesn't ruin your own machine. In terms of cloud is kind of a harder place to access, but there are some cheap clouds out there. It's fun to just write an app, even if it's just a hello world, and chuck it on a cloud. I know AWS is kind of pricey, even they don't really have some free options, but I think DigitalOcean and other vendors, you can have some really cheap options just to see what it's like.
And I just want to add to that. When I came to VMware, I honestly hadn't ever played with virtual machines or anything like that before either. And I realized very quickly that VMware has so many channels on YouTube that you can watch. They have so many online resources that you can access. Literally, all you have to type in is VMware virtualization and you'll get a bunch of things thrown your way. And yeah, as Mark was saying, you can easily just download, VMware Fusion. You can download ISOs, watch a couple of these videos and play around with it. And yeah, it's pretty much, you have a lot of free resources just out on the internet provided by VMware as well. So if anybody, is really open to looking for it, it's right there for you.
For the more adventurous people among the core, VMware now skins very thin client images that can even fit on a Raspberry Pi. So, if you've got some especially small kit, you can definitely just boot up a couple VMs on Fusion or on a workstation application. And, it really is about getting stuck in to a certain degree. you know, a lot of the concepts when it comes to all the different resource constraints and whatnot really get illuminated more obviously through actual practice. But yeah, once again, it just comes down to, you know, having an objective that you want to meet. Like, you know, I'm going to have a cluster of Raspberry Pis, or I'm going to try to build an emulator service on a VM instead of just running it bare metal. So yeah, I mean, there is a lot of great training out there across all the different vendors on a lot of these concepts. And, you know, the beauty of like vendor agnostic is that most of the concepts will carry one-to-one. So any infrastructure experience is good experience if you can kind of relate it to, you know, your actual needs moving forward.
Right. Thanks, guys. One more question. Oh, well, just, you know, the Fusion, VMware Fusion, is that the consumer sort of version of your virtual machine?
Yeah, that's available to end users. You can download that. Although it's really hard to find the download link, but yeah, anyone can download it. Fusion is for Mac. We've got an equivalent product, Workstation Pro, free to download for Windows.
Right, right. Where do you see the industry? This sort of broader question, but where do you see the industry going in the next 5 years?
Shika, Vince, do you want to take this?
That's a good question. Well, Vince and I are actually in consulting, so we do see a lot of cloud migration projects. So a lot of people are moving their infrastructure from on-prem to cloud, but they also a lot of them do want a hybrid solution because you know, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of security reasons that they might want to keep certain applications or services on-prem still, because they don't want to just put it on like an AWS cloud or something. So I feel like it's still going to be a bit of a hybrid cloud solution, but we are moving definitely more towards cloud.
I think rather than getting too bogged down on the particular, you know, what box you're putting your operating system or this and that onto, I think the general trend when it comes to infrastructure code and automation is pretty much key to, you know, any vendor product. You know, the network devices, the actual guest OSs, the golden images, the operating system, even just like your, you know, the actual config on your OS. These days, you know, most of these things are getting driven by something like VRA or Terraform or Docker. And, you know, at the end of the day, like what we talked about in the slides about a template, you know, these are just YAML or JSON files. So really just getting comfortable with, you know, taking inputs and, you know, sanitize them in collections and, you know, actually doing a disciplined launch of these via code and actually trusting your code base to actually successfully execute. You know, that really is a big thing in this industry right now. We're looking to, you know, reduce the number of manual processes. So, you know, when general advice for your day to day, like if you have a manual task that you do every day of the week, you know, if you think, oh, maybe I should automate this. Nah, it's too much hassle. You know, I'll do it next week or maybe next time. It's really annoying, right? Just get in the habit of actually doing it today. It's like, oh, you know, I want to do my file cleanup. I'm just going to execute that via bash script or, you know, something like that. That kind of mindset is really where the industry is going because they're trying to do as little as possible in the most reliable way. And, you know, believe it or not, scripting is the way to go.
Great answer. Thank you. One question for Kalani. You mentioned that the VMware doesn't really offer internships. I was wondering why. Just because I'd be for sure very keen to explore that. I know a lot of other students would be keen, just because these days the culture is to just explore options in the summer period and sort of see how a company operates behind the scenes.
Yeah. Look, being a global company, we actually hire a lot of interns across the globe. Unfortunately, it's just not something that's really been, I guess, had too much attention. We do hire some interns, just not a lot. So for example, I'm hiring an intern next year in Mark's team, actually, in the research and development team early next year. So there are the one-offs, but there's not too many. I agree. I think internships are such a great opportunity for companies to obviously bring in that great talent, great perspectives, but also for students to also see what's out there. Unfortunately, it's just not something that we've really focused on. I think our grad program in general is a very growing program in Australia, even though I know in America we hire hundreds of interns. So it'll get there, just not yet.
Drawing off that from Kalani, if you guys do ever come across that internship application for my team, feel free to chuck me a message on LinkedIn, reach out. I'm happy to talk you through it.
Me too.
Thanks, guys.
Amazing. So good. Just before we wrap up, any final thoughts from your team?
Thanks for having us. Great
Yeah,
honor
and
for
just
us to be here.
yeah, and just remember to, I guess, have fun and like with your teammates as well and team members, like build a good rapport, like if that's what it's about in the industry as well, you know, working in a team. So that's a very important takeaway as well.
One little tip that I'd like to give, you know, this isn't crucial to winning or actually even, you know, doing the hackathon per se, but I encourage all you guys just do a quick, you know, post-mortem at the end of the whole thing and just see what could have done better in the hackathon, what you'd like to done next time. And, you know, that will it's really important to do that while it's all fresh. And, you know, especially if you actually end up, you know, carrying your hackathon through as a permanent project that you might want to do. You know, it's important to strike while the iron's hot. You know, writing notes is not necessarily the funnest thing to do after blowing, you know, 24 or 48 hours on, you know, in front of your laptop. But yeah, I think there's a lot of little things that you can give yourself an advantage for next time, saying, oh, you know, just remember that you should get your code base ready for this, or commit more often. And, you know, these are the things that we kind of forget after the adrenaline wears off. So yeah, just reflect a little bit, I suppose, and have a good time.
And one last thing for me, I think what Lassie and the Atlassian team mentioned, having a really good presentation is very important as well. It's pretty much as important as like actually creating your app, because yeah, if you don't present it well, then nobody's going to actually see the potential of your product. So make sure to put a lot of thought into that too.
Yeah, and just a quick last word from me. Look, I think from a recruitment perspective, thank you. I think this is a great opportunity for all of you, you know, for your experience. You know, definitely when you're going for an interview, talk about this, what you've learned. There's so much data and experience that comes out of this, working in a team, you know, working with time management. You know, these are all really important skills that you're getting in 48 hours. So, you know, definitely own that experience, and, you know, good on you, you know, doing it over the weekend. I know there's probably not too many things we could be doing given lockdown, but you know, still it's amazing that you're giving up this time. So all of you are already so far ahead with that career, with that experience and development perspective.
Right, amazing insights, guys. Really, thanks so much. Thank you to the VMware team on behalf of the Syncs team and all the participants. Really good presentations and thoughts. Thanks guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
See you, everyone.
Thank you.